I love the fact that they have an index that you can click on, but it doesn't actually take you to where you want to go. So we can go here. Let's try this way to get there. Alright, so we're going to get started, and our first piece that we're going to be reading, let's get this window closed so that I'm not terribly distracted, as I always am. Okay, so we're going to start out with Snow White and Rose Red. And let me close the window so I don't get as much noise in the background, because it's distracting me. And I think I've cooled down the room enough for tonight. I think, hopefully. Alright, so let's begin with Snow White and Rose Red. There was once a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage. In front of the cottage was a garden wherein stood 2 rose trees, one of which bore white and the other red roses. She had 2 children who were like the 2 rose trees, and one was called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were as good and happy, as busy and cheerful as every 2 children in the world were. Only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red liked better to run about in the meadows and fields, seeking flowers and catching butterflies. But Snow White sat at home with her mother and helped her with the housework, or read to her when there was nothing to do. The 2 children were so fond of one another that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together. And when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never so long as we live." And their mother would add, "What one has she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone and gathered red berries, and no beasts did them any harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands, the roe grazed by their side, and the stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat upon the boughs and sang whatever they knew. No mishap overtook them. If they had stayed too late in the forest and the night came on, they laid themselves down near one another upon the moss and slept until morning came, and their mother knew this and did not worry on their account. Once, when they had spent the night in the wood and the dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up and looked quite kindly at them, but said nothing and went into the forest. And when they looked round, they found that they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would certainly have fallen into it in the darkness if they had only gone a few paces further. And their mother told them that it must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's little cottage so neat that it was a pleasure to look inside it. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she woke, in which was a rose from each tree. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the hob. The kettle was of brass and shone like gold, so brightly was it polished. In the evening, when the snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door." And then they sat round the hearth, and the mother took her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book. And the two girls listened as they sat and spun. And close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them, upon a perch, sat a white dove with its head hidden beneath its wings. One evening, as they were thus sitting comfortably together, someone knocked at the door as if he wished to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveler who is seeking shelter." Rose Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking that it was a poor man, but it was not. It was a bear that stretched his broad black head within the door. Rose Red screamed and sprung back. The lamb bleated, the dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak, and said, "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm. I am half frozen, and only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Poor bear," said the mother, "lie down by the fire. Only take care that you do not burn your coat." Then she cried, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear will do you no harm. He means well." So they both came out, and by the lamb and dove came nearer, and were not afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little." So they brought the broom and swept the bear's hide clean, and he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly and comfortably. It was not long before they grew quite at home, and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his hair with their hands, put their feet upon his back and rolled him about, or they took a hazel switch and beat him, and when he growled they laughed. Okay? But the bear took it all in good part. Only when they were too rough, he called out, "Leave me alive, children. Snow White, Rose Red, will you beat your wooer dead?" When it was bedtime, the others went to bed, and the mother said to the bear, "You can lie there by the hearth, and then you will be safe from the cold and the bad weather." As soon as day dawned, the two children let him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. Henceforth, the bear came every evening at the same time, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves with him as much as they liked, and they got so used to him that the doors were never fastened until their black friend had arrived. When spring had come, and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "Now I must go away, and cannot come back for the whole summer." "Where are you going then, dear bear?" said Snow White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below, and cannot work their way through. But now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it and come out to pry and steal. And what once gets into their hands and to their caves does not easily see daylight again." Snow White was quite sorry at his departure, and as she unbolted the door for him, and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off. and it seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not sure about it. The bear ran away quickly and was soon out of sight beyond the trees. A short time afterwards, the mother sent her children into the forest to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk something was jumping backwards and forwards in the grass. But they could not make out what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a snow-white beard a yard long. The end of the beard was caught in a crevice of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping about like a dog tied to a rope, and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes, and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "What are you up to, little man?" said Rose Red. "You stupid prying goose," answered the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking. The little bit of food that we people get is immediately burnt up with heavy logs. We do not swallow so much as you coarse, greedy folk." I had just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished, but the cursed wedge was too smooth and suddenly sprang out, and the tree closed so quickly that I could not pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it is tight, and I cannot get away, and the silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh. Ugh, how odious you are! The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. "I will run and fetch someone," said Rose Red. "You senseless goose," snarled the dwarf. "Why should you fetch someone? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better?" "Don't be impatient," said Snow White. "I will help you." And she pulled her scissors out of her pocket and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay amongst the roots of the tree, and which was full of gold, and lifted it up, grumbling to himself. "Uncouth people, to cut off a piece of my fine beard! Bad luck to you." And then he swung the bag upon his back and went off without even once looking at the children. Some time afterwards, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. Try saying that 5 times fast. As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping towards the water, as if it was going to leap in. They ran to it and found it was the dwarf. "Where are you going?" said Rose Red. "You surely don't want to go into the water." "I am not such a fool," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that the accursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing line. A moment later, a big fish made a bite, and the feeble creature had not enough strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was of little good, for he was forced to follow the movements of the fish, and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but all in vain. The beard and line were entangled fast together. There was nothing to do but to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw that, he screamed out, "Is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure a man's face? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you have cut off the best part of it. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you had been made to run the soles off of your shoes." Then he took out a sack of pearls which lay in the rushes, and without another word he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. It happened that soon afterwards the mother sent the two children to the town to buy needles and thread, and laces and ribbons. The road led them across a heath, upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn about. There they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower and lower, and at last it settled near a rock not far away. Immediately they heard a loud, piteous cry. They ran up and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took tight hold of the little man, and pulled against the eagle so long that at last he let his booty go. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with his shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged all my brown coat, so that it is now all torn and full of holes, you clumsy creatures." Then he took up a sack full of precious stones and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his ingratitude, went on their own way and did their business in town. I mean, what are you going to do? As they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clean spot, and had not thought that anyone would come there so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled with all colors so beautifully that the children stood still and stared at them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen-gray face became copper-red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in a fright, but he could not reach his cave, for the bear was already close. Then, in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me, and I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life." "What do you want with such a slender fellow as I? You would not feel me between your teeth. Come, take these two wicked girls. They are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails. For mercy's sake, eat them." The bear took no heed of his words, but gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid. Wait, I will come with you." Then they recognized his voice and waited. And when he came up to them, suddenly his bear skin fell off, and he stood there a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen my treasures. I have had to run about the forest as a savage bear until I was freed by his death. Now he has got his well-deserved punishment." Snow White was married to him, and Rose Red to his brother, and they divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peaceably and happily with her children for many years. She took the two rose trees with her, and they stood before her window, and every year bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. All right, so how we doing? Everybody can hear me all right? Okay, so the Goose Girl. Let's see if this is the one that I'm familiar with. Yes, this is the one that I like. It's a fairly slightly longer than the other one, but not by much though. But yeah, it's one of my favorite fairy tales. Okay, so everybody good? Everybody enjoying themselves? Everybody can hear me okay? All right. Just have to make sure, since you're not in front of me and I can't hear you, and my microphone has a tendency to act all wonky occasionally. All right, so and then let's grab a drink. Let's close this out. And let's move this up. Okay. What does this say? All right. Let's see. Okay. So, the Goose Girl. The king of a great land died, and left his queen to take care of their only child. This child was a daughter, who was very beautiful, and her mother loved her dearly, and was very kind to her. And there was a good fairy, too, who was fond of the princess, and helped her mother to watch over her. When she grew up, she was betrothed to a prince who lived a great way off, and as the time drew near for her to be married, she got ready to set off on her journey to his country. Then the queen, her mother, packed up a great many costly things, jewels and gold and silver, trinkets and fine dresses, and in short, everything that became a royal bride. And she gave her a waiting maid to ride with her, and give her into the bridegroom's hands. And each had a horse for the journey. Now the princess's horse was the fairy's gift, and it was called Falada, and could speak. Because of course. When the time came for them to set out, the fairy went into her bedchamber, and took a little knife, and cut off a lock of her hair, and gave it to the princess, and said, "Take care of it, dear child, for it is a charm that may be of use to you on the road." Then they all took a sorrowful leave of the princess, and she put the lock of hair into her bosom, and got upon her horse, and set off on her journey to her bridegroom's kingdom. One day, as they were riding along by a brook, the princess began to feel very thirsty, and she said to her maid, "Pray get down and fetch me some water in my golden cup out of yonder brook, for I want to drink." "Nay," said the maid, "if you are thirsty, get off yourself, and stoop down by the water and drink. I shall not be your waiting maid any longer." Then she was so thirsty that she got down and knelt by the little brook and drank, for she was frightened, and dared not bring out her golden cup, and she wept, and said, "Alas, what will become of me?" And the lock answered her, and said, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it." But the princess was very gentle and meek, so she said nothing to her maid's ill behavior, but got upon her horse again. But the princess was baby. Then they all rode farther on their journey, till the day grew so warm and the sun so scorching that the bride began to feel very thirsty again. And at last, when they came to a river, she forgot her maid's rude speech and said, "Pray get down and fetch me some water to drink in my golden cup." But the maid answered her, and even spoke more haughtily than before, "Drink if you will, but I shall not be your waiting maid." Then the princess was so thirsty that she got off her horse and lay down and held her head over the running stream and cried and said, "What will become of me?" And the lock of hair answered her again, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew, sadly, sadly would she rue it." And as she leaned down to drink, the lock of hair fell from her bosom and floated away with the water. Now she was so frightened that she did not see it, but her maid saw it and was very glad, for she knew the charm, and she saw that the poor bride would be in her power now that she had lost the hair. So when the bride had done drinking, and would have gotten onto Falada again, the maid said, "I shall ride upon Falada, and you may have my horse instead." So she was forced to give up her horse, and soon afterwards to take off her royal clothes and put on her maid's shabby ones. At last, as they drew near the end of their journey, this treacherous servant threatened to kill her mistress if she ever told anyone what had happened. But Falada saw it all and marked it well. At last, as they drew near the end of their journey, then the waiting maid got upon Falada, and the real bride rode upon the other horse, and they went on in this way till at last they came to the royal court. There was great joy at their coming, and the prince flew to meet them, and lifted the maid from her horse, thinking she was the one who was to be his wife. But the true princess was told to stay in the court below. Now the old king happened just then to have nothing else to do, so he amused himself by sitting at the kitchen window and looking at what was going on, and he saw her in the courtyard. As she looked very pretty and too delicate for a waiting maid, he went up into the royal chamber to ask the bride who it was she had brought with her, and that was left standing in the court below. "I brought her with me for the sake of her company on the road. Pray give the girl some work to do, and that she may not be idle." The old king could not for some time think of any work for her to do. But at last he said, "I have a lad who takes care of my geese. She may go and help him." Now the name of this lad, that the real bride was to help in watching the king's geese, was Curdken. But the false bride said to the prince, "Dear husband, pray do me one piece of kindness." "That I will," said the prince. "Then tell one of your slaughterers to cut off the head of the horse I rode upon, for it was very unruly and plagued me sadly on the road." But the truth was, she was very much afraid lest Falada should some day or other speak and tell all she had done to the princess. She carried her point, and the faithful Falada was killed. But when the true princess heard of it, she wept, and begged the man to nail up Falada's head against a large dark gate of the city, through which she had to pass every morning and evening, that there she might still see him sometimes. When the slaughterer said he would do as she wished, and cut off the head, and nailed it up under the dark gate. Early the next morning, as she and Curdken went out through the gate, she said sorrowfully, "Falada, Falada, there thou hangest." And the head answered, Bride, bride, here thou gangest. Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it. Then they went out of the city and drove the geese on. And when she came to the meadow, she sat down upon a bank there, and let down her waving locks of hair, which were all pure silver. And when Curdken saw it glitter in the sun, he ran up, and would have pulled some of the locks out. But she cried, Blow, breezes, blow, let Curdken's hat go. Blow, breezes, go, let him after it go. O'er dales and rocks, away be it whirled, till the silvery locks are all combed and curled. Then came up a wind, so strong that it blew off Curdken's hat, and away it flew over the hills, and he was forced to turn and run after it, till, by the time he came back, she had done combing and curling her hair, and had put it back up safe again. Then he was very angry and sulky, and would not speak to her at all. But they watched the geese until it grew dark in the evening, and then drove them home afterwards. The next morning, as they were going through the dark gate, the poor girl looked up at Falada's head and cried, Falada, Falada, here thou hangest. And the head answered, Bride, bride, there thou gangest. Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it. Then she drove on the geese down again in the meadow, and began to comb out her hair as before. And Curdken ran up to her, and wanted to take hold of it. Curdken's hat go. Blow, breezes, blow, let him after it go. O'er hills, o'er dales and rocks, away it be whirled, till the silvery locks are all combed and curled. Then the wind came up, and blew away his hat, and off it flew a great way, over the hills and far away, so that he had to run after it. And when he came back, she had bound up her hair again, and all was safe. So they watched the geese till it grew dark. In the evening, after they came home, Curdken went to the old king and said, I cannot have that strange girl to help me to keep these geese any longer. Why? Said the king. Because instead of doing any good, she does nothing but tease me all day long. Then the king made him tell him what had happened, and Curdken said, When we go in the morning through the dark gate with our flock of geese, she cries and talks with the head of a horse that hangs upon the wall, and says, Falada, Falada, there thou hangest. And the head answers, Bride, bride, there thou gangest. Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it. And Curdken went on telling the king what had happened upon the meadow where the geese fed, how his hat was blown away, and how he was forced to run after it, and to leave his flock of geese themselves. But the old king told the boy to go out again the next day, and when morning came, he placed himself behind the dark gate, and heard how she spoke to Falada, and how Falada answered. Then he went into the field, and hid himself in the bush by the meadow's side, and he soon saw with his own eyes how they drove the flock of geese, and how after a little time she let down her hair that glittered in the sun. And then he heard her say, Blow, breezes, blow, let Curdken's hat go. Blow, breezes, blow, let him after it go. O'er hills, dales, and rocks, away be it whirled, till the silvery locks are all combed and curled. And soon came a gale of wind, and carried away Curdken's hat, and away went Curdken after it, while the girl went on combing and curling her hair. All this the old king saw, so he went home without being seen. And when the little goose girl came back in the evening, he called her aside, and asked her why she did so. But she burst into tears and said, "That I must not tell you or any man, or I shall lose my life." But the old king begged so hard that she had no peace until she had told him all the tale, from beginning to end, word for word. And it was very lucky for her that she did so, for when she had gone, the king ordered royal clothes to be put upon her, and gazed on her with wonder, she was so beautiful. Then he called his son and told him that he had only a false bride, for that she was merely a waiting maid, while the true bride stood by. And the young king rejoiced when he saw her beauty, and heard how meek and patient she had been. And without saying anything to the false bride, the king ordered a great feast to be got ready for all his court. The bridegroom sat at the top, with his false princess on one side, and the true one on the other. But nobody knew her again, for her beauty was quite dazzling to their eyes, and she did not seem at all like the little goose girl, now that she had her brilliant dress on. When they had eaten and drank, and were very merry, the old king said he would tell them a tale. So he began, and told all the story of the princess, as if it was one that he had once heard. And he asked the true waiting maid what she thought ought to be done to anyone who would behave thus. "Nothing better," said the false bride, "than that she should be thrown into a cask, stuck around with sharp nails, and that two white horses should be put to it, and should drag it from street to street till she was dead. "Thou art she," said the old king, "and as thou hast judged thyself, so shall it be done to thee." And the young king was then married to his true wife, and they reigned over the kingdom in peace and happiness all their lives. And the good fairy came to see them, and restored the faithful Falada to life again. A little bit gruesome, but one of my favorites of Grimm's fairy tales. Okay, so what was the third one? Let's see. Got about maybe 10 more minutes. So we'll see if there a really short one that we can do. I don't know if there's any short ones of Grimm's fairy tales. What is that? Not sure it's that one is not short. Yeah. And all of them are pretty much the same length. So let's see. Yeah, that one's even longer. So I think we've only got 10 more minutes left here. So probably gonna cut this a little bit short. Like that. I like all these stories. So alright, so I think we're gonna cut this a little bit short because I don't think we have enough time for a third one. But thank you guys for coming on. I hope you had a good time. I hope you had a good listening for this 45 minutes hour that we spent here together. So I hope you guys have an evening, and I hope everybody is well as they can be expected in this time of coronavirus and isolation. But I hope you guys bear up and be well, and have a good evening, and talk to you guys later, and see you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Same bat time, same bat place. See you later, and next time around we're going to have another selection of either we have War of the Worlds, we have Alice in Wonderland, we have Grimm's Fairy Tales, and what's the other one? We also had Anne Christian Andersen. And I'm going to put it to you guys to see which ones of those you would like me to read for you. So have a good night. Have a good evening. Be well. See you tomorrow. All right. Thank you for coming in.